Colin Greenspon, welcome back to We the Builders.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of pods for a whole host of reasons because I really try to spend time with my small team at Narya.
How big is the team?
It's me and my partner Falon, and then Peter's quite involved too. And there was a third partner in JD.
Part-time Peter into full-time. After this conversation, at least, there could be a 2-pager memo that could come out from thesis-driven investing.
The weaker the founding team is at building a true business, the more they need the platform.
You mentioned that you try to take a board seat. Why try to take a board seat?
In venture, we all talk about due diligence, right? It's, in theory, the most important thing one does. So when you think about the timeline of a relationship with a portfolio company, the diligence that you do before you put your first check in is a tiny piece of your relationship. Being on the board is more of like a way to ultimately help that company make the best decisions possible for the best outcome possible. If you are going to do something truly unique, you should get paid more. You should get paid sooner. But the bottom line is like good founders finish it up, and bad founders, they want a lifeline and they need help.
Colin Greenspon, welcome back to We the Builders.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
You know, after we'd recorded the first one, you weren't quite sure how we did. I actually wasn't quite sure how we did, but I wasn't looking to, get it to the masses, but I shared it with some of my, I would say, most curious, intelligent friends across venture and startups. And it ended up being a masterclass on thesis-driven investing. And as I looked back on it, I think I told you this yesterday over coffee. I think after this conversation, at least, there could be a 2-pager memo that could come out on at least one of the topics that we covered throughout these conversations. So it was very fascinating to get your views, which are, I would say, unique and independent-minded. I'm excited to dive into more topics today.
Yeah, well, I'm glad it was useful and productive. I certainly enjoyed the first conversation, and I got a lot of positive feedback from folks in my network and folks outside of my network who reached out and said that was really, really interesting how you think about investing and some of your history in your career and whatnot. And so it's always a little hard as someone who's having the conversation to think, well, this is super insightful and I'm really imparting wisdom on folks. But getting that positive feedback was really exciting, and hopefully we can do it again.
It was your first long form pod.
Yeah, I haven't done a lot of pods for a whole host of reasons, mostly because I really try to spend time with my small team at Narya and then our founders, and then when we're not doing that, finding the next founders to support and invest in. And so, but as I've become less green in this role, I think that there's ways to help others more sort of indirectly through this, and even just being forced to sort of articulate your thoughts in this kind of format, I think can be pretty accretive to introspection and thinking through where you really have conviction about something and where you are maybe just kind of repeating things because you've gotten so used to saying them. And I talk a lot about Mimeticism and why that's so bad and why you need to stay away from all these different things. But if I say that too often, I'm sort of being mimetic with my past self in some ways too. And so this format is sort of almost like a version of like looking in the mirror and just making sure I have true and honest conviction in what I'm actually preaching.
You obviously don't make, from last time, just for the audience, you make very few high conviction investments in a given year.
Right.
Probably 1 to 5 would be around that range for the newer audience. And you're very intentional about not going on to raise hundreds of millions of dollars just because you can or just because you have the network. You mentioned in our last conversation that you keep the fund size under 150 mil, and so that you can stay nimble and curious. And you mentioned you have a small team. How big is the team?
It's 2 partners full time.
Okay.
And then
the team is just you and
it's me
Falon.
and my partner Falon, and
Okay.
then Peter's quite involved too. But
Okay. So
two, as far as employees,
right.
it's two of us.
Part-time Peter and two full-time.
And there
In a
were
way,
well, there
yeah.
were and there was a third partner in JD, and he when he went into politics, then there became two. And we often have this debate internally around what is the right team size, and I think there's this convention of, as you raise subsequent funds, you should expand the team and you should do more. But there's also this conventional wisdom that as you raise subsequent funds, you should raise more capital. And if you look at some of the best funds historically in the asset class, some have grown, team, function, stage, AUM, but some have stayed in their lanes. And those funds, and a few you haven't even heard of, just produce consistent returns because there's an element of really knowing your partner. In my instance, if it's a slightly bigger team, knowing your partners and figuring out the best way to leverage each other, the best way to push and pull each other, the best way to respectfully disagree with each other. And if you start getting into this pressure of, well, okay, now we have two funds, so that's in our case 2x the AUM, and we'll raise a third fund at some point, and I think that will be a little bit bigger, but we'll see. I think you start making decisions based on things that are not really what your core focus and business and skill set are. If you bring on another senior level person, then the agency, if you're doing it the right way, and it's a true partner, a lot of people have the title partner these days and doesn't really mean much. But if we were to bring someone on and call him or her a partner, that person would be a true partner. And so yes, then agency would be spread out among 3 people or 4 people or whatever the whatever the math is. Obviously, if you're hiring more junior people, the agency is spread a little bit, but in a different way. And I don't want to be like slightly dystopian for the more junior or younger people watching this, but venture's always been a cottage industry.
Yeah.
And it's always very hard to think about hiring junior people.
Yeah.
Regardless of how talented they are.
It's because it's like an apprenticeship in a way, if they're going to do it right. Is that why?
Well, I think that there's a business model question around, do you have the capacity or want the capacity for someone to grow into being a partner with you? And of course, if someone is good, you should want them to stay. And so I think if we were to hire anyone, there would always be the potential for them to be as senior and as amazing as possible.
Yeah.
If they prove themselves out over time. And so the question though becomes, if you don't know that person already and you're a small team, by adding one person, you're sort of changing the team by 33%. It's a material deviation from where we currently are.
Yeah.
And so that sort of the training piece of that, and I don't mean that in like a condescending way, like, oh, I'm a senior guy, and so I'm gonna train this person because I know better. I 100% believe that folks who are just coming out of school or didn't go to college have different insights than I do and could be mentoring me on many things. And so it's not that, but there's just ways about operating in a firm that do require some ramp, and just by legal definition, it is an employee, and there's responsibility that goes with that. And the ROI on tied to that responsibility is sometimes opaque.
Yeah.
And where Fal and I sit today, we feel that our deal flow is first class. Our ability to provide whatever it is our founders need from us, provide advice, provide introductions, whether it's to downstream capital or to potential business partners or customers or potential hires. Like, we feel like that's in a really good place and we don't feel overwhelmed. Um, there's also an element of just, I'm sure we'll talk about AI in many capacities during this this session, but you the operations of a fund, of a venture fund, are so much more efficient now with the evolution of what one can do with software. And that's AI. It's better fund administration tools, it's better deal sourcing tools. And so from where we sit, I think the mimetic behavior would have been to, oh, okay, we have a fund one's going really well. We now have a second fund and we're gonna be around for at least 10. Someone used to say to me, you get to keep your job for 10 more years when you raise a second fund. And there's some truth to that, but expanding the team feels like the thing you should do. When you really think about it, if you don't need to do it, no one's really asking you to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes investors or prospective investors will say, "Oh, you're gonna expand the team," and I say, I don't. We'll be opportunistic, but I don't think so because this is working really well.
Yeah.
We just had a couple things that have allowed our metrics in Fund One to really pop, and it's all a lot of it's mostly illiquid progress so far, but the performance so far would suggest that this is working for our goals and the goals as we've articulated them to our investors and our founders. And so I feel that tension a little bit. It's sort of like the FOMO stuff. Do you feel it because you know everyone's doing it and you want to stay away from it, but you can't you can't totally block out the noise.
Yeah.
And there's that tension on a little bit on hiring too. But my guess is that we stay pretty lean. And whether if we're going to add someone, the key thing, it's not how smart they are. It's not what their track record is. It's not how big a company they built before. It's not how good they are at chess or whatever. It's like, do we trust them? Do they trust us?
Yeah.
And it's really hard to build trust without time. And so there's people in our network with whom we're very close, and maybe there could be something over time, but for right now, that's certainly not a priority of ours.
You also escape the noise of platform teams. Like a lot of VCs, would because I know you define value add as very different in our last conversation. But I think the consensus belief now is that platform team that supports on recruiting or design, media, marketing, I don't know, all those functions is essential almost. I don't know how seed funds support those teams or build those teams, or early, I guess, venture funds. But how did you not even get sucked into that? You don't have a platform function.
Well, I think there's a reality of with one fund, there's sort of an AUM reality to this too. How many people are you going to hire and can you hire? But probably a more interesting conversation is around why that's not a priority for us. And one of the great things, let me just to back up for a second. So I came in to venture as a recovering lawyer, right? And I was just so happy to have got an opportunity. And when you think about the various asset classes into which I could have gone, I mean, there's sort of three main ones. There's venture, on the buy side anyway. There's sort of venture, there's hedge funds, and there's private equity, and there's credit. There's all sorts of other things, but just on true sort of equity investing. On the hedge fund side, and there's at a high level, you're sort of investing in public markets, and you're doing all sorts of research, you're having conversations, and you're making bets, which you can often do from your computer, right, or from your office, and you're oftentimes making very short-term bets. Some funds are very long, but you're in some ways reacting to, you're sort of seeing around the corner how the stock market might react as opposed to what a company's actually going to do. And the longer term holders have a slightly different approach. But that wasn't interesting to me just because it felt like there wasn't a lot of building. And then you got private equity where there is real building. You're taking a true control position, usually over 50%, where you have legitimate control. But a lot of those strategies really felt to me like there was sort of a lot of financial engineering to fix a company or to make it even more efficient so everyone could make more money. And oftentimes a lot of jobs are lost in that regard. And so that for me and what I wanted to do, that didn't feel right. But then you have venture where you can put capital behind people who are really like trying to solve for the future. And that's like super inspiring. But the other really interesting thing about venture, and to go to your question, is it's very collaborative. Doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And so you can have Narya on the board or on your cap table, lean team, going to help in certain ways. We can go into that. We touched on a little bit in the last conversation. And then you can have a big platform fund that can help with recruiting, that can help with marketing. And depending on what the archetype of the founder or the founders is, that they sort of need to figure out that combination of what they don't have to pick one.
Yeah.
As a fund, you sort of have to pick one. I don't think it's great to sort of, if you're going to be platform, to kind of half-ass it.
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of this. I don't want to do it. I don't have to do it. And if I think our companies need it, I have lots of friends at these funds who can do all that stuff. That being said, I do think that I sort of challenge this idea that it's required to have a platform now. I think some of the biggest funds by AUM are platforms. I think some of them are not. And this is such an easy thing for me to say as an investor. I'm not seeing everything, but I would sort of posit that there's like a correlation with the weaker the founding team is at building a true business, the more they need the platform. Because they're just really good at tech, or they're really good at marketing, but they don't really know how to build product. And in my experience, the best teams, one, are using tech in very multidisciplinary ways, but two, the founding teams, and by that I don't just mean whether you have a founder title, I just mean sort of the early, say 10, 20 employees, however people come together, they've sort of self-selected into having diversity of talent and skill sets, and figuring out where they need help. And those groups tend to, maybe they can leverage a platform, but oftentimes when they have a fund that has a platform that's invested in them, they say, well, I don't need that, or I need it in isolated instances. And so the bottom line is like good founders figure shit out. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so that, and bad founders, it's like they want a lifeline, and they need help. And in some ways it's a way to sort of mask a weakness, because you got this, you sort of, it feels like you have more control over some of these things when it's really your investor doing a lot of it for you. And I think that often it feels right at the time because you're sort of breathing a sigh of relief if you're not good at something and someone else is helping you out. But once you get wise to what's actually going on, you might find that that's actually not where you wanted to go, and you've sort of lost control of your company in a different way. So, but it's I mean, these models are so fluid, and it really just depends.
Yeah, and I guess it can happen to companies in different stages. They could, have gone public and realized that, and it's like that they became too dependent. on some outside help, or they could, fail earlier. It probably is not really correlated with how successful they are.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and I think like if everything you do, even what we do at Narya, like what's the perfect way to have the utmost conviction that you're doing something the right way? In my mind, that's getting feedback from as many constituents as possible and then as many sort of consigliaries as possible too, right? It's testing the market, it's testing thought leaders in adjacent markets, but then it's having folks around you who have done it in different ways to be able to say, well, here's what I think you're missing, but then having other voices to say, well, you're missing it a little bit, but it's closer than this person is saying, and so I think there's there's real benefit in having diversity of thought and skill sets on a cap table, and that's not like saying it's not tied to AUM, it's not tied to
Yeah.
platform versus like a more leaner fund, but like what we do, we are not a fund that says we need X percent and we're going to box this fund out or this angel investor or this strategic, because every single successful company I've been a part of has had wonderful funds, wonderful people investing and helping in different ways. It doesn't scale. In some ways, it's like really bad to have one fund that takes 20%, whether they have a platform or whether they don't, because you're just getting their worldview. You're getting their Silicon Valley worldview, or you're getting their Midwest worldview, or you're getting their European worldview. And that's bad. It's bad if you only hire a certain way. It's bad if you take capital on only a certain way.
That's an interesting point. So, an interesting point in terms of, I guess, value add in form of diversity on the cap table, and how each just serve their own purpose. So you described value add in our previous conversation. Well, one, you mentioned that you try to take a board seat, and I didn't ask you then, but why try to take a board seat? Why is that important?
In venture, we all talk about due diligence, right? It's in theory, the most important thing one does. It's got to do all your diligence, and you're going to figure this out, whether you should invest or not. And then once you've done all this diligence, you're going to come with this term sheet and write this check, and then you're going to come in and
You're going to write the memo first.
Yeah, you write the memo, or it's probably a lot of people having, the Chat GPT or Groks or whatever writing their memos, which you can tell, by the way. It's a different question when I think of my kids in school and all that stuff, but it's an interesting time for sure. But you you do all this diligence, and then you're in, and then everything's cool, right? This company's crushing it, and you just kind of hang out, right? Because and then you go find the next company. I would argue that one, I debate how much diligence is actually being done, especially in 2026. If you think about how fast deals are getting done, we can that's a separate conversation we can talk about. But if you think about the timeline, when you say it aloud, it's like so obvious. But when you think about the timeline of a relationship with a portfolio company, the diligence that you do before you put your first check in is a tiny piece of your relationship. And so the way being on the board is more of like it's easier just to describe it that way. You don't have to be on the board. You can stay very close to the founders in other ways. And I have a lot of friends that are very good at that, but it puts a little more structure around it. And it's a way to effectively conduct ongoing diligence so that you can ultimately help that company and that team make the best decisions possible for the best outcome possible. And hopefully that's, 100x, but sometimes it's not. And maybe it's a soft landing, or maybe it's a strategic sale. Maybe it's a strategic acquisition. Maybe it's a pivot. And if you're not in the room, whether it's a boardroom or the founder's office, like if you're not spending time in real life, in person with these people,
Yeah.
you just doesn't mean it won't work out, but you're not going to be able to add the same value because you're not feeling like life and interpersonal relationships are a lot about like physical energy, I would argue.
Yeah. I
Not to get
100%
like
agree.
too Eastern or whatever, but it's and so there's an energy you can't sense if you're not in person.
Oh, no, Zoom absolutely sucks. I
And
think I told you yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah.
well,
It was
and it has its place.
yeah.
And I still like doing calls where you don't see people. Um, Sometimes people get very offended by that. "Oh, I can't see
Those
you.
are better than
I
Zoom.
can't see you. What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm walking, but
Yeah.
I'm listening." So, and we did this for a long time before Zoom existed. But it's that for me, the board presence is is a way to do that. A lot of my friends would say that's an inefficient use of your time. Your job is to find the best companies, and the really good founders are going to figure this stuff out.
And keep finding them, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yes. Yes, the really good, as I said before, the really good founders will figure most of this stuff out. But if you talk to any really good founder who's built $1 billion business or $1 trillion business, they've always had people around them
Mm.
who help them with their toughest decisions.
Yeah.
And for me, staying on boards where we and Fallon as well, we can do that work. Uh, it's to us the most efficient way of helping, and then also in a self-serving way.
Mm.
And part of the reason why I call it ongoing due diligence, it's we don't believe in getting a percentage and then just holding on with pro rata. What we like to say is pro rata is lazy. Like if you love something, you should put as much money as possible into it,
Yeah.
and if you don't, like, be supportive, put a little money in, and be upfront about that before you write the first check. But to really ascertain if this is gonna be one of your breakout companies, you need to spend time. And so that's the model that we employ, and it's working for us. Obviously, there's only so many boards one can sit on, and so as we get into fund 3, 4, and move on, that's something we'll be cognizant of, and how do we make sure we're not overextended?
Mm.
But if we're doing the right thing, companies will have liquidity. DPI does exist. We have DPI, and there'll be more. And it's just there's a sequencing that you can do where you can sit on a certain number of boards, be helpful, and then
Term limits, sort of self-imposed, I guess.
yeah. I don't think it's I don't think it's tied to necessarily to chronology. It's like a temporal thing. It's more there's a time when a company has moved on. So we had a company that I was on the board of. We had a company that just went public recently, and my value add is is better on the private side, and there were better folks to take my seat and the other director seats once that company became public.
Right.
And so, not always the case, but in this instance,
Right.
and so we'll just be thoughtful about it. And for now, I mean, I I feel like we can be very efficient, and others could be more efficient if they wanted to.
Mm.
And it's not there's no doesn't create any bandwidth issues right now.
And then one of the value adds you mentioned was that, well, y you said that there's a lot of risk capital out there, most of it is not strategic. And then how you like to support the founders you invest in is, like, help cover their blind spots. Can you expand on that from, I guess, being involved in some of the companies you've been involved with? What have you seen? What are some examples of where a unique idea failed to implement I guess, or innovate um, their business model, and where y- you saw some exceptional examples of business model innovation?
Yeah, I think from a on the strategic risk capital point, you I mean, you've had the privilege of interviewing or having conversation with some of my other friends who are either full-time VCs or the VCs and operators, and they're some of the best out there. But if you sort of zoom out and look at venture as a whole, the level of engagement is very low, and it's pretty lonely for founders when they try to tap their investors. And so there's a subset of funds that do a good job at this and in different ways. Um, I mean, the examples of people not being prepared for a board meeting, having not even looked at the deck, having always asking the same question, like almost like forgetting what the company even does. Like really, I would say like pretty egregious stuff that one could even debate if that if there's like a fiduciary kind of, you know, duty lapse in that regard. But perhaps not. But more importantly, it's just like you're on this board for a reason to really be supporting the company. And if you don't know what the company, you're not paying attention, you don't know what the company's doing, or you're checking your email during board meetings the whole time. It's there's just a lot of that. And there's a lot of the other thing that I see a lot of is like peppering the team on the past. You know, it's asking for data. What's the LTV to CAC? Like, why are we saying, you know, why are we measuring revenue this way? All these like financial questions that are perfectly legitimate questions to ask, but they're not appropriate for a board meeting. A board meeting should be about figuring out what's working, understanding that so we can get more of it, what's not working, and trying to triage that. And you can anchor that in the past, but as long as it's with the goal of thinking about what's next versus pointing fingers or just going on to some, you know, quant exercise of like digging into the models. Do that with the CFO offline. And we do that, but just not in the board meeting. And then, and so you sort of get all these boards that just get derailed and like, and they're just ultimately not productive. And so where I always try to start these things, and it starts at sort of at inception with diligence, but it's like, okay, well, if you are going to do something truly unique, you should get paid more. You should get paid sooner. And you potentially one of the ways is like you should share in the upside if your customer or is successful, or your client. That's not how deals are typically done.
Would you describe this as creating win-win situations with customers?
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of a risk on where it's like only the success fee, and that's one way to do it. That could be effective, and then that's truly a win-win. That obviously impacts working capital, but we tend to not be as sensitive on generating revenue in the early innings if we think there's promise down the road, and we'll keep funding companies, and most of our partners will do the same if that's a clear strategy. I think that the best way is to get both, right? If you're truly doing something that is very special, you should, as I said, you should get paid in a traditional way, and then there should be like kickers on top for performance. And you might not be able to get that early on, but we always try to. I mean, the question, like the business model innovation conversation I have with the teams I work with, starts with like, okay, we've invested, we're not recording this, like no BS. What are you actually doing today that no one out there is doing based on your assessment of what's out there? And you know, here's what I think you're doing. You know, I think you've got interesting software. There's clearly early suggestion of a product market fit. But I also think you've got this really unique understanding, like for us, because because Narya does a lot of stuff in more esoteric industries, and so we've got a company that's in the land appraisal space. There aren't there are horizontal tools that can help ingest data and make determinations on, compare parcels of land and historic data to suggest what land value should be. But this is a team with real like appraisal DNA, and because of that, their unfair advantage is they understand the market better than any other tech company, and that impacts how they build their product because they're seeing around the corner as to how a market's going to evolve better than anyone else because they actually know the market. And also, it impacts how they engage with the customers because they're real insiders and the customers trust. We talked about trust earlier. The customers trust them because a subset of these employees, especially people on the sales team, were actually appraisers themselves before. And so you sort of have a bunch of inside baseball there. And then because of that, and because you're the only player that's has a data advantage, has a macro advantage seeing into the future, and has a relationship advantage, you can charge more, and you can convince customers to do things that they wouldn't do with other partners or providers. And so what my job is to suss that out of the founders and say, well, how is this done today? A lot of times, like in this example, oh, well, it's pen and paper. Maybe it's Excel. Okay. So any software platform is going to be an upgrade. But what's the one thing that your customers really, really want? Like, what's the one problem they're trying to optimize for? And yeah, it's great to have this digitized. It's great to have the God view of all this land and valuations to be able to better have conversations internally, better have conversations with folks in your county or state, depending on who the customer is, and be able to make more informed decisions. Sometimes it's ultimately like, well, actually, the real goal is we think we've been under assessing, and so we think there's like a 10% delta here that if we do this the right way, that can allow us to increase revenue so that we can do all these other projects that will be great for the county or the state or whatnot. So create a source of revenue that is really needed for the broader welfare of the citizens of this this location. And so then it's like, okay, well, let's share in that upside. And so it's not, there's not one way to do it. Sometimes it's, other examples have been, if you have really special technology, even if it's in biotech, like take a Palantir model of forward deployed engineers and put that in a customer. Like the more a customer engages with you, let them behave like they're part of the company. Like that's another lens I like. And there's all sorts of other examples like that. But there's no, these companies are all like so bespoke. There should never be one way to do any of these things. That's why I don't have anything against the NBC or the NVCA, but this concept of using the NVCA form for every deal, on one hand, it makes life easier because it's just this form contract. And having practiced law, I have a perspective on this. Every company is so unique, and every relationship is very special. And so maybe that's the wrong way to do a deal. Maybe there's a better way. And it's that mindset should go into how you engage with your customers too. And then, but people will push back and say, well, that's not scalable. You can't have an inside sales model as you start to, cross 10 million, 25 million ARR if you're going to have all these like bespoke things you're doing. And I'm not talking about feature creep on the product side. You do have to systematize product in a way where it is scalable. I'm just talking about
Customer engagement.
Little tweaks around customer engagement and how you think about revenue. Because the reality is, if you're doing, as I said before, if you're doing something that is truly differentiated people will pay you for it.
When did you first realize that level of customer engagement is like a true tell on if the product is working?
When you say customer, I guess it depends on what you mean by the question, because it's, I mean, there's, if the product is so good, and I've had examples of customers they just sign up and they don't even, there's no discussion at all.
Right.
But the more you're in these unique markets where there aren't really incumbents and you're kind of figuring it out with your customers, then the engagement matters a lot. We invested in a, let's call it an AI company. I'd like to say we don't invest in AI companies because I think that cheapens what the founders are actually doing. But of course, all of our companies use AI. This is a company, I won't say the name because it hasn't been disclosed yet, but started by two serial entrepreneurs in the healthcare space that are really focused on reducing spend in health systems and in hospital systems. And so they're ultimately selling to the CFO of these hospital systems. And the business model innovation there, and to your point on customer engagement, these two folks also have a little bit of history in investing as well. But these two folks went to dozens of health systems who are either LPs in this fund they're affiliated with or folks with whom they've been close over the last decade. And they got all these health systems to become design partners with them. And so that's a genius business model and a genius example of business model innovation, because you've got the folks that know it even better. In my appraisal example, these are legacy, the founders are, sort of legacy people who could have been customers, but they're still building as builders and they're separate from the customers. But in this example, in the healthcare space, they are bringing their customers with them from day one. And they all signed these, I think it was 7 or so of them, these sort of to be design partners. And there's no economic upside or anything, but but by them doing that, one, they trust this team. 2, that they really care about this problem because they're putting real resources behind it. They're really committing in sweat equity to fix this. And 3, while not guaranteed, it's highly likely that if this product is good, or even if this product doesn't suck, that you've got hundreds of millions in revenue because you've already built this with them. And so it's like this crazy example of business model innovation in, using the market to figure out exactly how to design a product, figure out exactly, how to compensate so everyone wins, and figuring exactly out what the specific pain points are. And that is really interesting inside baseball, but in a way where it's not like the founders are ex-CFOs from hospital systems going and building. It's sort of, they're still bringing their unique skill sets to this company. So they're sort of outsiders, but they're pulling in the insiders. And that's that's a really cool hybrid model.
Yeah.
And that's
pretty impressive that they, especially if they haven't had experience in the industry, that they're able to infiltrate. And that means they're really onto a problem that matters.
And one of the design partners actually tried to build a tool internally, and it was quite effective. And they saved lots and lots of money, but the tool is not as good as the tool that this team is building.
Oh, interesting.
And once it's announced, I'm so excited about this company, but once it's announced, I can say more. But it's like a perfect example of this confluence of brilliant founders, not having a thesis, brilliant founders saying healthcare is totally fucked, right? We need to fix this. And we can talk about Doge and we can talk about, Maha and stuff, but on the private side too, these health systems are just bloated. And you've got Surgeon X buying a really, the Ferrari of scalpels, when that's just a complete waste of money. And then you've got all these issues. And they said, but they figured this out by asking. That's so
they went on the sort of this didn't assume all the problems based on their knowledge. They went on a discovery sort of journey with the design partners and
the thesis, like, and this is like so perfect for Narya because it's like sort of what we do too.
yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
what is there? Healthcare is messed up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people aren't focused on healthcare because everyone's doing AI and, and just AI, general AI is just going to save the world or destroy the world. And so then it doesn't matter if that happens, but and so put all your money there, but it's like, and they all got all these funds got burned by healthcare. And it's like, this is this most massive market ever that is hidden in plain sight that has all these problems that can be addressed right now with these advances in compute, with groups that are finally willing to cut the blow because they need to, because healthcare costs are going not just on the insurance side, but these systems, their margins are just shrinking.
Oh yeah.
And just there's this sort of existential crisis they need to deal with. And so these co-founders had a thesis that there were all these issues. They didn't know where the issues were. They just said, let's go around the country and talk to these folks in our network. And this theme kept coming back around just bloat. And I saw companies 10 years trying to do this, but the technology wasn't there where you could actually really figure out what was going on in location X or in location Y. And they, not only with the design partners, they figure out who the champions were internally and what to design. They figure out which sort of subspecialty to focus on first, where there's the biggest bloat. And each hospital system said the same thing. And so it was like, and this is exactly what we do at Narya. It's like, slow down, take your time, and really listen and learn and see if your thesis is right. Maybe you get all this feedback and you move on, because these founders have a ton of examples of things they were excited about, and they went and sort of tapped their networks. And
did you invest before or after?
Before or after
them developing before them discovering the problem, the exact problem?
I invested in the first round, but they went and did the work before they raised any capital.
But you were there, sort of witnessing their journey as they were discovering.
Yes,
and having these.
And these are jogging partners. These are people I go running with, and talk about trust. These are people I'll share more at some point, but developed a relationship with one of the guys over 10 years.
Right.
And we're sparring partners in a lot of things, and with this other guy over the last 3 or 4 years. And so
the trust was there.
And it was a natural thing to talk to me about it, because of the trust, I share with them what we're trying to do at Narya. They share with me what they're excited about, what they're concerned about. And it's all very mission driven. It's all about using venture dollars to do something that is really beneficial to, and I think of it in 3 buckets, either to our government, to our corporations, or to our citizens. And or to anyone here, to our people. And those things can sort of fuse together a little bit too, but and you sort of find your people that have a similar lens.
Yeah.
And then you get to do really cool things like this. And that's and if you were in some other asset class, back to my other point, there would be, sure, there's sometimes there are club deals in private equity, but you'd have this group say, okay, this is all mine, and we don't need your capital. But it's oh, well, no, Narya is actually interesting because they're really plugged in the state of Ohio, and there's a lot of interesting systems there that could use this, or, you have different experience in these companies or with these networks, and your network can overlap with ours in an accretive way, versus get your elbows out and it's mine. And so, anyway, I love this concept of business model innovation is probably the most important part of how you give yourself the best chance to become a healthy monopoly, because it allows you just to move faster, because you are able to take on more capital, if you're really understanding what the customer wants, and and to your point, like creating win-win scenarios, not always doable in the early days, but you
Right.
try, or at least you have the conversation.
Yeah.
It becomes much less transactional. It becomes much more lucrative for both sides. And then when the competition does come, you're so embedded.
And it only happens through dialogue, through conversation, and developing those relationships, nurturing those relationships.
Yeah, it's not over email. You got
Yeah.
to it's boots on the
You got to
ground.
show up in person.
I mean, these
Yeah.
guys were traveling all over the place, talking to all these systems.
Yeah.
You know, they'd have meetings, and then someone wouldn't show up from a hospital system X, and they'd have to come
Yeah.
back, and they were grinding.
It
And
is,
it's got to be
yeah.
a really special company because they did the work ahead of time, and it was pretty cool. Because what you see
That in itself is a moat today.
to
Willing
do
to
the work,
willing to get on a plane, willing to, drive whatever hours and, go see your most important customer, investor in person, spending that time in
totally.
person.
I was talking to someone who's a very good angel investor 2 weeks ago, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I'm not. I won't sit on boards. I won't travel. I'll do whatever I can to help them. But if they don't live near me, it has to be on Zoom or a call, or they can come see me." And
Yeah.
that's not how I do things. But
Right.
I mean, I don't want to be on planes every day either.
Yeah.
I like, I think air travel is just generally really bad for your body,
Yeah.
as well as the sanity of that experience. And then I have a wife and 3 kids, and I love them dearly and like spending time with them.
Yeah.
I coach my son's somewhat mediocre 8th grade basketball team, and it's amazing. And like,
Nice.
and so there's a balance, but
Yeah.
I do think forget the investors, like maybe they can pull it off a little better, but the founders that don't go and spend time with their customers,
Yeah.
I mean, there are always exceptions where special businesses can be created where you don't do that, but it's really important.
You described the investments you seek to make as esoteric. What do you mean by that? And from my understanding of what you meant by that is that these are either underserved problems, uh, or there's just no category king in that category.
Yeah, I guess, well, I'm happy to invest in something that's not esoteric. If it's I'm happy, by esoteric market, it's understood by very few people.
Right.
And so there's the denominator of folks that have,
Is it just an understanding or the willingness to do something about it?
well, it's the denominator of folks who understand the market, are competent enough to build something in that market or to have a thesis as to how they can do something unique, and have the sort of tech chops to oftentimes to bridge the gap between sort of an analog business and bringing it into, digitizing it or making it at least software enabled. Doesn't mean it doesn't have hardware and all this stuff. But so that's what I mean by esoteric markets. But I wouldn't say that, I mean, plenty of our investments are not like, N of one kind of, I think they're N of one in their own ways, but they're not sort of N of one companies in how that term is typically used, where it's like, the only company doing X. Like I think like, Strive Asset Management was an N of one in what it was doing, and it's sort of focused on shareholder, not stakeholder capitalism in the asset management space. But our gene therapy company, Kriya, what they're specifically doing is very special. But to use that term, is gene therapy an esoteric? I think in the scheme of like how many Americans know a lot about how gene therapy works, I would say yes. But as far as, there's plenty of gene therapy companies. So it's not that Narya seeks out, the lens for us is like, is this a truly need to solve problem?
How do you define need to solve problems?
Well, subjectively, if I'm being honest, right? It's like our lens of, there needs to be a large enough group, whether that's individuals like going back to the three beneficiaries of the asset class in my mind. It's whether it's individuals, whether it's businesses, or whether it's the government. And it doesn't have to be all individuals. Like the thesis behind Rumble, which is is sort of a YouTube competitor that is sort of focused on holding the line on free speech. The thesis was not that this was for everyone. The thesis was that, as back in 2020, when a lot of these big tech platforms were sort of moving the goalposts in what was considered objectionable content, we felt like it was creating a lot of white space to have a platform that didn't move the goalposts and was a true digital town square, and didn't mean that was for everyone. But our assessment was that the market was going to be large enough for, and this was a problem because a lot of people were starting to talk about it. And we thought it was an investable problem, or a problem in which one could invest before others did. And, that was a good outcome for us. And so we had a thesis in Hallow. We had a thesis on faith in the broadest sense of what that means. It doesn't mean God. It doesn't mean any particular religion. It doesn't even have to be religion. It's the idea of spirituality, that was going to make a comeback in our country, perhaps globally. And this was during COVID. There were a lot of people very isolated, and they felt lonely, and so that was a problem. So it's hard to predict what, sometimes we have ideas about the problems. In the Hallow case, we built a thesis, but the thesis was really built based on trying to think of something different, because we just saw during COVID so many Zoom competitors and like Peloton competitors. It's like, no, those companies need to be created 5 years ago. And so that's kind of the lens, and we try really hard to make it not too tangential to the problem. And so you could make an argument for every single company that it's solving a need to solve problem. Like, ChatGPT is solving a need to solve problem because it allows me to, set my son's basketball team lineup faster, and then I can spend more time with my family. And that's really important to me. So that's a need to solve problem. Not a false statement, but it's got to be a capital P problem. And so, our company that was one of our, I guess our most recent deal that was announced is a company called Valinor, which is sort of doing a holding company, operating company, or holding company, product company, either one, model in defense. And the need to solve problem there, I mean, on one hand, like literally everyone is building a defense company right now.
Yeah.
It's like crazy. And what's also crazy, as an aside, is like 90% of the founders seem to be trying to like pick off a subset of what Anduril is doing, which,
the financial engineering playbook.
Well, just given my relationship with some people at Anduril, and knowing how good they are at business model innovation, at building product, at understanding the market, both public and private sector, I think that's a mistake. Like, I don't know if a monopoly has quite been created, but it's close. And so when we think about defense, it's like, well, what are these other problems that, like, what's like a need to solve problem in defense that no one, not just a need to solve problem, but no one's tackling. Like, fission's a need to solve problem. There's a lot of companies doing small modular reactors. Yeah. Fusion is perhaps a need to solve problem. There's a couple dozen companies, and we've looked at them. We haven't, we're interested. We haven't made it big yet. But what Valinor is specifically doing is they're saying everyone who's investing in building in defense is going after these really, really, really big problems. We're going to go after these short-term vital needs of various branches of starting with the U.S. government, whether it's commerce, whether it's DOE, whether it's the Army, whether it's the Marine Corps. And given our relationships there, we understand what is actually needed, and we can either build those products, or we can bring in existing companies and optimize them with sort of a hub and spoke model with centralized skills that can overlap, and that can and expertise that can move into different product codes depending on what's needed at any moment in time. And that's when you put that all together, that becomes a very, very large opportunity. But each specific case of a effectively think of like almost like very, very movable containers that can be in theater triage centers for people that are getting wounded in battle. There's a bunch of other products they're working on. They're all really interesting in of themselves. Is each one $100 billion idea? No, but when you put them all together, it's like super powerful. And so that is a need to solve problem that, and the ellipsis there, which is where we spend our time, is the need to solve problem that others aren't trying to solve. Or I mean, that's the best way, and the Valinor is a perfect example of that. Or the others who are trying to solve it, we don't think they're as good as this team.
I almost don't want to give it away, but like I had this conclusion in the end of last year around when we met that the holding company structure is going to be very interesting in a variety of industries.
Okay. Did I say something about that, or you?
No,
Okay.
no. I was down my own rabbit holes and discovered
Okay.
that is going to be a very interesting structure.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you've seen it, and it's been interesting in biotech.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. And so sorry, finish your thought. I cut you off.
Yeah, I was just surprised not more people think about. And then
Well, it's complicated, right? It's so much harder.
It's very hard to fundraise for too.
I mean, it's if you're going to try to do 10 different things, and the idea is that we've got this nimble team at the core and these capabilities, and we can go into, product co 1, product co 2, product co 3. So it's like it can get very complicated if you don't trust. It's like, well, how does this actually move back? How does this move back and forth? Like, if this person's going to work on this product, when does she go to product 4? Like, and how do you sort of how do you just coordinate it all? There's sort of an operational complexity to it.
You have to be one hell of a talent recruiter.
Yes, there's that, and then there's also this question around like what are the products?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line? And if you draw the line, is it based on an area of expertise? Is it based on?
That's the hard question.
Is it based on economics? Is it unit and if it's economics, is it unit economics? Is it ultimate upside? Is it how much of your working capital this eats at? Is it what kind of new talent you have to hire and what are their salaries? Like there's way more decisions you have to make.
Yeah.
And so you need people that are, have a clear thesis, a clear theory of the case as to how this is going to be built. Like, and you instead of needing like everyone talks about, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, whatever, like startups put their projections, whatever. It's really like a 6 to 12-month plan, if we're being honest, like for most true startups.
Yeah.
And they don't really know. They're kind of making it up.
Yeah.
But for the hub and spoke model, you really need at least a 3-year plan.
You need a
maybe a
detailed
5-year
plan. Yeah.
5-year plan. And Valinor has that in spades. And it's just really exciting to watch. And not to over talk about just one of our companies, but
no, I met a similar founder in the media space who I don't think he's made any of this public, so I won't disclose his name, but he started this sort of services company, making films and videos for other companies. And then the goal was to use that to finance a proper production studio.
Right.
And then that became part of a holding company structure where there's another 2 companies that make more sense strategically. And so he's been able to fundraise for that, which
Yeah, I mean, and there's also like,
and those are product companies. So it's like services business and a product business. It was very interesting.
yeah, and I don't, I mean, the holding company structure, I mean, that in some ways that's really more of a legal structure as opposed to,
Yeah.
but this mentality of building lots of things. I mean, I don't know, is like Netflix a holding company? Or in the way they,
Yeah.
so,
Eh,
I mean, it's not structurally, no,
Right.
but this idea of sort of acquiring all sorts of content, creating all sorts of content in a very broad way that is interesting to different subset of different people is like each each of those categories doesn't work. Maybe from unit economics, it might be interesting, but the scale is not there unless you sort of do this all together. And so, I agree with you, um, that this model will permeate other categories. I mean, an interesting one. I'm just thinking about this right now. An interesting. I mean, I've seen it a lot in biotech. Um, an interesting way. I think it could be really interesting in like alternative energy. Um,
Mm.
I don't have the thesis yet, but I'm gonna start thinking about that based on this conversation because it just allows you to not have as big a. You don't have to go after as big a market.
Yeah. And you can accumulate value over time. It is also, I think, sort of self-selecting in a way where you would need to meet founders with a certain level of ambition. This is a lot of work and takes a certain level of ambition, attention to detail, um, thoughtfulness, which is
Are there any founders you would invest in where you think they don't have ambition?
no,
Because I
no,
like I've been wrong on
yeah,
assessing whether someone's had ambition. I thought
right.
they did, but if I don't think they have ambition, there's no way I'm investing in that founder. I'm
They
kind of
haven't,
teasing you a
right.
little because I know that's not exactly what you meant,
But
but
that's not what I meant.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's
It's a different level of ambition.
it's like this intellectual arrogance that you know it, this 3 to 5 year plan is how I think things are going to turn out. Um, which is, I think, like what you want to see in founders.
Yeah, well, I don't I think the good ones are not arrogant. I think they they have a plan. They're confident but not arrogant, and they have escape hatches. I mean, it's what
Right. It,
I'm not saying the plan holds. I'm just
yeah,
saying you have to think about it in a different way
yeah.
if you're running if you're running essentially 5 or 6 businesses in one versus
Yeah, I guess confidence is the better term to use, but that's what I meant.
yeah,
That's what I meant.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean,
It
well,
doesn't
there's
mean
plenty
that
of
they think it's the, whatever they write is the final word and, it's like Bible and, you know, that's not what I meant. It's more so that, it's just like the confidence is
yeah,
different. Yeah.
yeah, and there's some counter examples to this, but I think if you come across it's hard to build engender trust with your employees, with your investors, with your existing and prospective customers, with your business, with your network partners, whatever. If you're confidence, yes, it's not hard. Arrogance, it's very hard.
Yeah. No, so I guess like,
But I understand. I know what you mean.
yeah. Okay. Hopefully the audience will understand.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, okay. What do you mean by a competent founder?
What do I mean by competent founder?
Yeah, you brought that up.
I did
Yeah.
just now.
Yeah, no. In like previously, you were defining that you're trying to look for, you're trying to evaluate a competent founder in the specific market. Wait, how do you define a competent founder? Because a lot of investors would again argue that they invest in competent, like baseline. Every founder is competent, but
Yeah, it's one of these things that's probably somewhat hard to articulate, but the more you spend time with hundreds of founders over a career of doing this, the easier it gets. But to sort of that's completely not useful to anyone listening to this. I guess what I think about, I mean, there's archetypes of founders, but that's a different question. What I think about, like, how do I get conviction that this person or this team is competent? It's, do I feel that they truly, truly understand their market? as it exists today? And do they have a theory about where it's going? Always, or anyone that we would work with always, but that part's that's option value. It's hypothetical. It's not about competence, but like, and that sounds like the most obvious thing that like anyone would ever say, right? It's like, okay, well, yeah, they're building a company in space tech, so clearly they know all about space tech or defense or whatever. Wrong, they don't. Like a lot of folks who pitch me, it's like, oh, they're coming over from, what'd you do before? Oh, I worked at this, this marketplace for, um, for media assets. What are you doing now? Oh, well, we're going to build these defense systems for the Ukraine. It's like, doesn't mean it won't work, but that doesn't check that box of being a competent founder. So that's one, understanding the market. Doesn't mean you have to come from the industry, but like when you're having
At
these
least you need to display that competence or in terms of understanding of the market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Two, and this is harder to suss out, but it's probably more important, is like, is the founder, let's just assume there's one founder, it's easier for the dialogue. Is the founder, is he or she aware of his or her limits as they exist today for this business? Or said in a more practical way, how can this founder, like, what does this founder need to do to hire around him or her to do what the founder knows needs to happen because the founder is competent in understanding the market? And so like this, the second step is, okay, because you can check the box in the first one. Oftentimes you don't, but you check the box. Okay, this person really understands this market, but they're like delusional in what they think they can do. They're a tech person, but they think they can sell. They think they can hire the whole team. They think they don't need a financial person. And that's fine when there's one or two maybe, but it gets very complicated. And so that's, to me, is the second piece of that, but probably more important. And then the third is, do they have a view on, like, do they know how they want to engage with their investors? It ties to business savvy a little bit. It's like, but I think it's too, like, the wrong thing for me to say is like, oh, well, do they have like a really good business model, like an operating plan? Like, I want to see the memo, or I want to see the Excel or whatever, like that, no. You can have that, or you don't have to have it to be competent, but you need to know how you're going to pick your investors. They'll pick you and you pick them, but like, like when I talk to, check the first two boxes. Okay, understands the industry, great. Understands their blind spots, or where they don't have the right skill set because they understand the industry. Awesome. But well, why are you excited about Narya, or what, or even a broader question like, how can an investor help you besides with capital? And a perfectly fine answer, perhaps this goes to arrogance, not confidence, and maybe I don't love it, but others might, is like, I just want your money, and then I want you to go away because I'm going to build this amazing company.
Right.
But again, that's a good answer, because at least from a competence standpoint, if that's truly how they feel, I think, or it's like, look, I really need someone to call bullshit on me because I'm really worried that there's so much market opportunity here, but I know I need to stay focused, and I'm really worried about like going after shiny objects. And if you actually take the time and like, there's so many different ways to get comfortable with those, but there's others too, but those are like the big three. You all of a sudden now have like a real understanding of how this person, why this person is the right is a good person to build in this category, why this person is less likely to get in his or her own way, and whether or not you can actually help. Because the worst thing is to think you can help and then have not had the conversation, or the the person sort of gave you a bogus answer. And so th- th- that that is a if you can check all three of those, then you've got someone who has the true potential to be like a true business leader. Not just a tech innovator, not just picking the right market, not just being really smart, but not hiring around, but someone who can be a real like CEO. And that's, we're not incubating companies. Like we want founders who can lead and build and scale.
What does being a right business leader mean? And what does engaging with investors in the right way mean? I know there's a communication element to it you're referring to, but just to expand on that.
Well, I think engaging with I just mean on that competence point, like knowing how you. So if the example is someone who says like, I really need, I'm worried about focus. It's having an open, for me, it would be usually at a board level, but having an open dialogue with that investor and hopefully all the other investors around what's going on. So that investor can say, feels like your aperture is widening a little bit. Is that really where you want to go? And then you have the dialogue. And so that's sort of the best way to do that. And then being a good business leader, it's just putting all those elements together, and you have confidence. I mean, there's a thousand different ways to run a business, so I can't give you one answer there.
Right.
But it's do they have the elements where you feel comfortable that they can engender trust, they can lead, they'll get support from anyone they hire.
Mm-hmm.
They will be competent facing with whatever the market is they're going after when they're out there, either in thought leadership or engaging with prospective customers. They have a presence and command of what they're doing and their business, where downstream investors will think they're legit. And obviously the numbers need to work and all these things, but it's a strong A+ founder who has a capability of like delegating when things should be delegated, owning things when things should be owned, being open and honest, not marketing to the team, not marketing to the investors, not marketing to you market always a little bit to the customers, but not over marketing. And that's why I like these founders that really partner with their customers.
I guess the best way of thinking about selling should be that it needs to be a partnership, and the other entity needs to get value, and if you haven't figured out how you're going to create that value, and then earlier stages, that's like a dialogue in the form of this design partnership, right? But
yeah,
you're trying to figure out how to create value, basically.
Sure, but I think in any of the examples of these companies I've given earlier today, like I think it's some time you just want that to be baked into the product, and you just want to be able to have have a sales model where you call up and these people are onboarded. But the way customer 20 gets comfortable that this is legit is because customers 1 through 5 were deeply embedded, and they might even be doing all or at least part of the selling.
Yeah.
And then that also creates like zero CAC and all sorts of interesting unit economics, but it's more efficient, and it also just allows a faster sale. And with that confidence, you can charge more too.
You brought up thought leadership as like one of the traits in a good business leader. What does that mean? Does that mean being chronically online on Twitter? Does that mean
No. I'm just saying. I'm saying if well,
speaking at the right forums where their customers are?
if thought leadership is a piece of what you're doing, and that doesn't always have to be the right way to build a business.
Right.
I'm just saying it's being done.
It's one of the ways.
It's being done in a right way. And I guess what I mean by that is like, if you are giving your thoughts, hopefully people hear them and think you are a leader.
Right.
Which, sorry to dumb it down, like that, like thought leadership. It's like, oh, well, you talk to all these people. Yeah, we're going to do all this thought leadership, and we're going to have a blog, and we're going to do, we're going to be on X like
But nobody finds you
20,
insightful, and
20 times, and all you're
right.
and they're either just reposting other people's stuff, or they're not saying anything, or they're doing a bunch of emojis, and either they're not adding value, or somebody's don't even know what they mean, and it's just kind of that's not, to me, that's not thought leadership. That's just distraction.
Right.
And so if you, and whether it can be a podcast, it can be writing, it just, if you're going to do it, it can be a very, very effective channel if you come across as, go back to the C word, is competent, like someone that's,
Right.
like, if you read it, is this person really good at what they do? It doesn't have to be like insanely unique all the time,
Right.
but like there's plenty of like there's plenty of people that publish financial investment memos, and some of them, when you read them, they're not, like, the macro insights aren't actually that surprising, and you could debate if they're insights, but the thoughts are presented in such a clear and concise way. You're like, this person, really is in control of his business and understanding the market and what he will do and not do. Um, and that's
It's a peek into someone's mind and how they think, and that is, I guess, a data point in how you see people.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
And how you hear them.
yeah, and then I would even say
Yeah.
this is thought. I mean, there's a difference between thought leadership and communications, right?
Yeah.
There's sort of staying in touch with people because you are interested in just keeping a relationship warm, and then there's a different way to do that. And then there's like, okay, how are we going to tell the market and anyone who cares about this market that we know something that others don't, or that we know it just as well as an incumbent or something?
Mm.
And my only point was, I have plenty of businesses that are heads down and don't need to be doing that, or where there's a more binary outcome. Our space defense company, if it works, the government will like it and buy it,
Mhm.
and continue to do more with them. Our gene therapy company, if you're curing diseases, and in a way where you perhaps can have treatment just once in your life,
Right.
like you don't need to be writing a lot of blogs about that. Or
Yeah.
And so it sort of just more depends on what you're doing, but it's more in the enterprise. We have a company that I was just at, that's doing physical security and safety, and they're starting with coal mines. So I had this board meeting. I was actually down at a coal mine in Alabama, which was, I'd never been in a coal mine before. It was really cool. But they sort of the first company to really use AI in subterranean mines, and there's all sorts of things one can do there. And so as they think about thought leadership, it's letting other mine operators and other equipment providers in that category know about their capabilities. And in the early innings, that thought leadership is very different than what it might be if there's 20 players, because and so it just evolves over time too, depending on the specific market.
Do you think the generic entrepreneurship advice on building in public has been over-indexed?
When you say building in public,
It is, talking about what, I don't think it matters in all cases. It's like very case specific, but then seems to be misperceived, and all, there are
you
bubbles
mean
and
versus stealth?
versus stealth. Yeah, there's all sorts of well, there are market bubbles, and then there are Twitter bubbles, and those Twitter bubbles tend to infiltrate like a lot of circles, and then a near crop of entrepreneurial talent you
I
see
don't.
seem to
Yeah,
there.
some of these things, I'm always like, maybe like a turn behind on being aware of them. Like I'm certainly on Twitter, but I
Yeah.
actually do not have Twitter on my phone
But that's great.
by design. But I think I don't. I mean, if a company is in stealth, it depends on what they're doing. If what they're doing is super um, unique and telling the market about it doesn't help them, then I don't know why they should do it. And is that what you? I'm not,
Yeah.
because I'm not. I haven't read a lot about why. What's the argument for why you need to build publicly?
Because it's easier. So the argument for building in public or just being chronically online and posting is that it's slightly easier to generate trust with potential employees um, and potential investors, and you get into the state of where you can generate inbound versus you're going out. So it's that is the argument for it.
Yeah, I mean, sure. There's
Yeah.
it depends on how much you're sharing. It depends how you're sharing it.
Yeah.
I certainly think that if people for whatever reason care, or maybe they don't even care, but enough people follow you, and you rightly or wrongly are seen as not a thought leader, but an amplifier or an influencer or whatever term you could, just an active person on Twitter, um, that that's like lowercase p powerful. It might help have a few conversations, but I think the good funds will always, if something's truly unique or has the potential to be unique, good funds there are enough good funds out there that um, you can find quality capital to support you.
Yeah.
And so I don't have any issue with doing it publicly
Yeah.
in like the way you're talking about it, but I don't, it's not obvious to me. Well, it's more obvious to me that would be a distraction and a bad idea than it would be a good idea.
Right.
But but it doesn't mean it couldn't be a good idea.
Right.
And so I just think if you're, if you need, if you've got a great idea and you don't have a team, and you're someone who doesn't already have the network, and you need to build your network, there's all sorts of ways to do it. And maybe doing it publicly is fine, or maybe you should go to a local incumbent that has some industrial acumen, or you should go to an industry conference, or you should go to an academic hub,
Yeah.
and like maybe do it more thoughtfully.
Do it more intentionally. Yeah.
Back to, like, I think what I said last time, or one of the things I said is, like, there's there's being really loud, and there's like having like a strong voice, and those aren't necessarily the same thing. And I think, like, loud can be literally the volume or the decibel level, but loud can also be frequency.
Yeah.
And I think that the more time someone's spending sharing their thoughts, the less time they are building.
Yeah.
Just like you said this
All this takes time.
Last time was my first long form pod.
Yeah.
I think, that's true. And I don't do a lot of them because it's, that's not my job, right? My job is to be a custodian of capital and find the best founders and then help them. And that is pretty time consuming. And so when I see, and we look at all this stuff when we're doing our diligence, like and again, doing our diligence before we invest and after we invest.
Yeah.
If we see a founder that's nonstop writing, nonstop, usually that's not great. There's definitely exceptions. Sometimes maybe you have a team and you have a leadership team of 10 people. And so then maybe it works because you got someone that's doing a lot of thought leadership. Like, so Strive Asset Management had a component of, it was sort of tied to best practices in corporate governance and doing bear hug letters to companies that they thought were not promoting this idea of shareholder first. And so there was a huge public letter writing and commentary piece to the business. But for other businesses, that would make no sense.
You mentioned there's a right way to run a board meeting. And so what is the right way in a private company to run a board meeting?
The first thing is if you want people to act, I mean, I sort of made a comment about people not reading the materials and how that's not okay to be if you're going to be a good director.
Yeah.
The trick sometimes to be a little bit more charitable is oftentimes you get them like at 10 p.m. the night before a 9 a.m. board meeting, and that's not great. So I think the first thing is you are you are organized ahead of the meeting, and you make sure that people get the information they need with ample time for them to review it. That's reasonable. Because then they can. The best questions often come from like sitting on something, and then you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, oh wait, okay, this doesn't add up, or
Yeah.
oh, here's a really interesting opportunity that I want to bring up in the board meeting. And then so that's one. That's the pre. The I would argue that the board meeting should be spent talking about how we effectively, like, how do we build a durable franchise? How do we own this market? And anything it could be sort of very macro about how the market's moving. It could be very micro and tactical about how we're building product, how we're optimizing the sales engine to go do that. But I sort of alluded to this before. What happens is you sort of, and I think a lot of it's because people aren't prepared, if we're being really honest. And a lot of it's like you sort of it's like people go through the motions or in the board meeting, and it's like you there's sort of there's three places the company could be in when you get to the board meeting. Um, it's either like company's really struggling, so you sort of have a grumpy board meeting,
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of like passive aggressive stuff. I re- like these are bad. These are the ways they can go wrong. Like that's not what it should be, but that could happen. And then there's like the company that's doing okay, but nothing really inspiring. And then you're kind of like, it's like sort of what do we talk about? Because is this going anywhere? You're kind of like a deer in the headlights. You're kind of frozen a little bit because it's like, okay, well, it's not growing, but it's not something where we need to figure out a soft landing yet. We got plenty of cash, but it's not really working. So like, there's so much to talk about, but what's the direction? And then there's the one which is often fun where the company's doing really, really well. And that just leads into like a lot of laughter and high fives and stuff. And that's like a terrible board meeting too, because it's such a waste of time. Feels good, but it's,
Right.
and the red light one feels terrible,
Yeah.
but none of them are really productive. And so the founder needs to have a the board is advising, right? The board should not, or sorry, the investors who usually have board seats in venture are advising, and they may have questions, but the founder needs to take control of the board meeting to get feedback on the different things the team is doing or the different things the team is grappling with
Mm.
to go win over the next year, win the quarter, win the year. And instead instead what happens, you have a nice little agenda, you sort of do a deck flipping thing, and then investors ask a bunch of questions. Usually every investor feels like they should ask a couple questions every segment because they want to feel like they're adding value, but it just becomes this performance.
Deck flipping exercise.
Well, it
Yeah.
deck flipping, or it's this performance because
Yeah.
investor X is going to talk about this, and it's just like, what are we doing here? Like, I want you to come in and say, like one of my best companies, the board meeting, the most recent board meeting, and they're pretty far along at this point. And so it's like, hey, you guys saw the deck. We're doing really well. Probably going to grow 4x year on year again. Like all really good. Unit economics are good. If you have questions, let's talk about it offline. But here's what we're really trying to debate. Should we just go all in on making sure we get to, monopoly status or market saturation or durable franchise, whatever terms you want to use in our core business? Or should we now start going adjacent? And if we do, how do we do that? And what's too far? What's too much of a tangent? What's core? What have you seen in other companies where this works? What mistakes? And this is all teed up beforehand so people could think about it. And you have a real discussion around that in like one or two issues. So that to me is like, this is, as a founder, this is like your one chance to get all these people that are backing you, that have all these other networks that are compounding to your network or accretive to your network. And they have all sorts of different wisdom than you might have. And they're also coming at this from the outside. They're not in the weeds like you are. So the perspective is interesting. And this is your one chance to get advice, to get feedback. But you got to control it to avoid the like, oh, it's quiet, I should ask a question. Or, oh, I'm frustrated they didn't grow as much as much last quarter. They said they were going to grow X% and it was 5% less. Like, why was that? Well, there's probably 10 reasons, but you can have those conversations not in the board meeting, because it doesn't, like, it only matters if there's like a strategy discussion around it. And so that's what I think is important. And I think on the investor side, making sure that the CEO is running a board meeting that way is important. But I also think making sure you're using, when you were in a board meeting, you were a director of the company. You are not a shareholder representing your fund. And in venture, that gets very conflated.
Right.
And so what happens is every fund has like I was saying earlier, there's like, it's not a zero sum game. You have all these different funds, but you get all these you could also get this really choppy conversation, is where fund X wants to talk about what your hiring strategy is. And, independent director who's an expert in the category wants to talk about what's going on in DC. Right. And you end up having all these, like, it's almost like not even a conversation. It's like 10 people or, right. So that's important too. You gotta, and the CEO should do this, but the other directors who have experience should do this too, and hold everyone accountable to having a meeting about the strategy of the company going forward from this moment in time. Yeah. Not using it as it's not a meeting. It's a board meeting. Have your, in one of my other companies, what we do is we do a deep data dive on financials, and it's a biotech company, and science, like around the board meeting, but one-on-one with each investor. They do it like prior, or with each director rather, but there's only like 3 of us.
They do a financial deep dive separately? Is that?
They get into like the data, the financial data and the technical scientific data ahead of the board meeting, because
that would be super useful probably.
Right. Yeah. But it's not, if you're on a public company board, maybe you come in and it's the board meeting, that's fine. But this is a different thing. And you're wearing, you're an investor, you're a director, you're an advisor, you're a consigliere, you're
trying to,
sometimes a shrink, like, but and so you need to have time it's not just the board meeting. And so I guess to be succinct on it, the board meeting needs to really be about the future and strategy and what's not working, and what is working, how do we do more of it?
How do you maintain long-term focus while for while also like doing a quarterly analysis of what are what are the
Well,
challenges
I
that
mean, the quarterly,
yeah.
I think,
But that's often a critique of not private but public companies where everyone seems to be optimizing for the quarter, and like private companies don't do that
well,
obviously,
I
but
think if you don't have your annual goals are hard to achieve if there aren't milestones and a shorter term check-ins to,
right.
okay, so how do we, and so that's what I mean. I don't think the board meeting should be focused on like, okay, what, I mean, I hate this acronym, but OKRs,
Yeah, yeah,
objectives and key results. It's like,
yeah,
okay, let's like a fancy way. Here's the shit we need to do really well.
yeah,
Like, and like, I don't know, like there's some, there's like, and that's like a convent. Let's put the OKRs up on the board.
yeah.
And it's like, it's,
It's
it's
also
often
probably
like the most obvious stuff. It's like, well,
yeah,
we should hire 3 people and we should, like my best companies, we're not putting OKRs on the,
mm,
but in part of that though, my best by like part of that is because they've gotten past some of that.
yeah,
And like in the early days, as you're figuring out,
mm,
you need some grounding, but the better way to do it is it's more of a higher level strategic conversation.
yeah,
It's not, the OKRs are for the employees.
yeah,
Like for the board, it's like, here is what I'm thinking about. I think this is from a top line standpoint. I think we could get to this amount of revenue by the end of the year. Do we think revenue is the right signal? Or the right goal we should be focused on? Or actually, should we be getting the biggest and best customers because our product is so unique?
right,
And let's not even charge them right now. But
yeah,
like a different way of business, a different version of business model innovation. Let's give it away for free because we're going to get so darn sticky in this thing,
right,
and we can charge them whatever we want later. Like, and our investors, we have enough cash, so we don't need to do it. Let's
yeah.
go get the 3 biggest companies in this.
But then it also helps the investors, um, you know, probably keep it at the back of their mind that if this is going to be the strategy, they might need more capital, or like, we should be prepared for it a year from now, and let's see how the strategy goes. But it helps you have a prepared mind for maybe a year from now, depending on how the strategy goes.
Sure.
Yep. So if, let's say, whatever strategy was discussed in a specific quarter, 2 quarters in, it didn't work out the way you were anticipating it would. Um,
That's never happened.
oh, okay. Is would for any major strategic changes, would the board have expectation that you get a call, or would you expect the CEO to use their best judgment to change course and then report on it, like in the quarterly meeting?
It's a judgment call. It depends on the level of materiality.
Right.
Um, I think I personally would like to be kept apprised of what's of a strategic shift, and I would be frustrated if I was not.
Yeah.
Um, assuming I'm on the board,
Yeah.
and that goes back to like why another example of like why being on the board is helpful, because sometimes like if you're not, you're whether it's a month or a quarter, you're behind, and then you sort of are like, wait, I didn't know we were doing that, and then you're like, you know what? Why did you do that? I actually have these 6 relationships that we could have leveraged, and I could have gotten that. I actually know someone at that company. I could have helped you, and so shame on the founder, but ultimately shame on me for not checking in.
Yeah.
And by being on the board, you sort of have more of the regular check-ins that way.
And then it goes back to you trying to spend most of your time with the founders and the companies you've invested in, and trying to figure out how to help them, and you considering that to be the best use of.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so yeah, I mean, but to go to answer that directly, it's the best version of that is like, hey, so we're not we had this plan and either we're not going to hit it or we had this strategy and I think we should do something different. But here's how I'm thinking about it. Here's what I'm planning on doing because I'm the leader of this business. What do you think? As opposed to, yeah, we're not going to hit the numbers. Got to figure out what to do. Like that's not a
Yeah.
that's not the way a leader should have that conversation, right? And it should be much more thought out before you in a way that's like collaborative, and you don't need to necessarily like have everything figured out, but you should at least have some ideas as to how you might want to do it. Maybe this is the wrong approach, but here's kind of directionally where I'm thinking about going. But
Right.
but if it's a simple like, look, we're not going to make revenue because this customer,
Yeah.
I thought we're going to land, didn't land, and we got to go back and figure this.
Yeah.
That's okay too. It just depends
Right.
on the specifics.
We talked about ingredients of a monopoly in our last conversation, and I think you did a great deep dive on what truly defensible IP means. And anyone listening should definitely check out episode 1. You did a great sort of deep dive on what an unfair advantage to access in the market would mean, or where our type of founder, you know, uh, usually would go build in that market. The two other things you brought up, one was engineering true trust with your customers, and I think the first half of our conversation really covers that in depth, what that means. The other part was, so this was a 4-part definition. Actual network effects. What do you mean by that? And
Well,
then would you add something else to what are the ingredients of a true monopoly?
yeah, I mean, I think for most of these are not just, each of these elements is not required, right? These are ways in which one can achieve. Sometimes monopoly has like a little bit of a dirty or negative connotation, and so I guess maybe to change the term, like I tend to think like market saturation. Let's say,
We see.
what's that?
I see.
Well, but we can call it a healthy monopoly or market saturation. You have a good amount of control of the market. On the network effect side, clearly there's the concept of social network effects. Like I think when people say network effects, that's what they really mean. Like Facebook, now Meta is like the perfect example of that, right? The more people got on, the more you needed to be on to engage with your friends and your networks, and then the more you could expand. Or LinkedIn, those are good examples.
What does that look like in an enterprise business?
I don't think, to me, the network effects are, it's that applies more where you've got sort of,
Consumer businesses?
well, I think the social piece applies
Right.
where, when I think there's data network effects, where the more groups you get on, like the more groups you get involved with sharing their data, even if it's scrubbed in a centralized way, so that you're not sharing private stuff of any one customer. That allows a company to build a product faster, which then benefits everyone who's on. And the more, and it allows you to sort of get more information out to people faster. And so there's there's different versions of a data network effect, but that's, I think, on the enterprise side, it's sort of in a multi-sided marketplace, right? So if you like businesses where, if we're really talking about a network effect, it's where effectively everyone has to be doing everything on one platform. And so one of our companies I would argue, has both let's call it an enterprise network effect, same thing as social, but with businesses. And then it also has a data network effect. And so what the company does is, It's called Codex. And what they do is effectively provide a secure channel of communication between governmental entities and corporations. And think about good use cases like where there's a subpoena, like let's say with one of these horrible shootings where a bunch of groups want to get information off of someone committed a mass shooting, want to get information off that person's phone. There was never like a secure way to make those requests to Apple, to Snap, to Facebook,
Right.
to Twitter. And this company's doing that. So it's really interesting. And so the data network effect is the more data that flows through the system, the better the software gets, which makes everything better.
Right.
Just the product just gets better and better and better,
Right.
has more data, can figure things out faster. This sort of,
In some way, that is the promise of the modern AI companies. It's especially vertical specific AI companies.
sure.
Yeah.
If enough folks in the network are providing the data.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah.
Codex is going to be a better partner the more folks that are on from a data side and how product is informed.
So that too is, I guess, rooted in the quality of partnerships.
Yeah.
You're able to do. Yeah.
But on the more traditional use of the term network effect, in this case, it would be like, this is why we love this business. This is like one of the few instances where it's actually competitors actually like having each other on the same platform, because they're going to ask the same information from like whatever socials are on this person's phone in that example. They're going to be the government might be trying to get information from Snap, from TikTok, from Facebook, probably not Facebook if you're on TikTok and Snap, but Instagram, whatever it is. And so it actually behooves all those players to have everyone on it, so they're not dealing with disparate systems and different ways of getting information. And so as more and more of those groups get on, it becomes more effectively required for everyone else to get on. And then on the government side, it's much easier. Once the FBI is on.
Is it specifically for the government? Their customer?
There's a bunch of use cases, but that's sort of the initial use case. And if you think about secure government to private sector communications, there was never a platform for that. And just the one-to-one is interesting, but
what kind of communication?
Subpoenas.
I see.
Specifically,
okay.
And we'll think about it this way. If you're Apple,
right,
or Stripe or whomever, and you get a request for all this information, it's sensitive information. How do you get it back securely?
Right. So it's like infrastructure for secure communication.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the network effects get interesting because you get more and more, as more and more governmental agencies come on, more and more want to come on, and then need to come on, and the same thing on the enterprise side.
Fascinating. Yeah, sounds like a very interesting company.
Very cool company.
We talked about Narya, maybe funds 3 and 4, and strategy around how you would deal with still taking on board seats or still being as involved with the companies. We talked about hiring strategy earlier. We talked about platform, no platform earlier. If well, you are a founder of a firm, right? So if Narya had a master plan, a multi-decade master plan, what would that be? I'm sure you've thought about it. So what is the master plan?
The first, like, if we're doing things the right way, we will be around. And so when we first developed this thesis, it and thought there it made sense to have another fund in the market, we thought that we could, the goal is like, if we're doing this right, this will endure for a quarter century, maybe longer. But like, to say, oh, it's this Narya's gonna be around for generations to come, like,
Even a quarter century fund, you would have outlived,
sure.
vast majority.
That's well, that is a result of us doing, or that would be one of several results of us doing, being happy with what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so
You're 1/3 the way there. Almost.
I guess.
Yeah.
I guess one fourth, we'll say.
Yeah. 2018? When did it start?
We started investing in 2020, so it's technically
Okay.
year, so just under one fourth, technically year 6. But or we've been doing it. So yeah. So I guess beginning year 7 actually. But we think that, or well, as long as we feel like we can be supporting founders who are A+, like mission driven, like of these like hardcore ambitious, to use the term from earlier, founders that really want to go solve these problems for the right reasons, because they really care about the problem. And sure, if they do, they'll make a lot of money, but that's not the motivating factor. They're like, if we continue to find those founders, then we'll continue to do what we're doing. And we, what Narya looks like, we will always be, unless the industry changes dramatically, we will always be a smaller fund. We will always be a quieter fund. We'll always be a more patient fund. We will always be we will always be contemplative. And we will always try to do things that are using the asset class to create real benefits, not like ethereal benefits or like fake things that sound beneficial but actually aren't. So like, okay, we care about the environment and we want to reduce carbon footprint. That's fine. Like, and then we've looked at a lot of interesting companies. We're looking at one right now. And like, we don't want to invest in like an accounting tool for climate tech companies or clean tech companies. That's not, if we're going to go do that, it's got to be someone who's really solving the real problem.
Right. What drives you?
Ultimately it's my family, and my family and myself. I love working hard. I love learning about new industries. I'm inspired by these founders that either reject or ignore all the dystopian narratives that might be in the media, and they think about ways to use their skills to actually do something about what's going on or what could be better. And I just think that is like if to be able to spend every day like with people thinking that way is like amazing. And then I think the other stuff that motivates me is to if I have founders who say Narya really listened and they really helped, like, and they like that's sort of what I care about. And like, they're always there. They do, they really, and they challenged me too. It wasn't just like they were yes men and women. It was a fund that actually called bullshit when it made sense to, and challenged me when they had skepticism, and it just became a better partnership. And we were sort of talking about this before, like on this but a couple of days ago, but I think like there's an element of when you do this with your LPs, with your team, with the people whom you back financially, and with all your sweat equity, you can just do it based on like outcomes, but you can also do it based on the people.
Yeah.
And the people who inspire you, the people with whom the people you want to emulate, the people with whom you want to build a better future. And that's like, and it took me a while. I mean, I obviously have more agency now with the fund that I co-founded, but like, I want to work with the good people. I want to work with the people that make me happy, that motivate me, that and that value me too. And so that's like, you can make that choice. And so that's also, like I said, we'll have the FOMO on different things, but that's like, as long as we stay in that lane, whether our funds get, a little bit bigger, and just stay like nimble and curious, then like, that's the dream. And, when we've sort of, we've been, we've accomplished a lot in a short amount of time by, staying honest with who we are and who we aren't. We're not, there's certain like deep things in Silicon Valley that aren't for us. We're looking mostly outside of the Bay for opportunities.
Every time I think like I walk in thinking, oh, like we're all the things we're gonna cover, and we walk in thinking that we're like, or do we have enough topics? Or I walk in thinking, do I have enough topics? And I like, as I approach the end, I'm like, man, there were all these different threads that I couldn't pull on, and uh, it's always great just sitting down with you and getting to I guess know you more over the last like 7-8 months. It's been fascinating. Uh, I think you do truly think very differently about things. And one of the things that stood out to me was, and we couldn't chat about this, but I guess you closed the master plan Narya loop with this, was uh, you choose to pursue business and opportunities with people you genuinely um, enjoy building the future with, or enjoy being around, who value you. And there's like a mutual relationship building, and that just that can't be fabricated, that cannot be accelerated. It's like very organic. And I guess but by that very worldview, that informs your fund or thesis.
Totally.
And sort of,
Well, and I
yeah,
think, I like, you can have your sort of, you can have your work life and then your personal life,
yeah.
and that's perfectly perfectly
I
fine.
don't think that works.
Fine way to do it. But if you're, but in some ways, this
Yeah.
job is all encompassing. And so if you're going to do that, make sure you really enjoy it. And so I like, we like, I go skiing with some of my founders and do other things, and they're friends, and they're people that we go to each other's weddings and things. And it's not just about the investment and the returns. Actually, those are, I mean, the investment needs to happen to often build the relationship, and the returns are sort of a residual piece of a much more meaningful partnership, where even if I look at like some of our companies that are starting to hit escape velocity, it's just like, we did this together. I obviously, as an investor, played a much smaller part than the team doing the real building, but it's just the most amazing feeling. And so I'm excited to keep doing it.
Well, Colin, thanks for coming back on.
Absolutely.
Hope to, get you back, because I know we will always have conversations.